That South Africans should expect the election results announcement by Saturday the 11th of May or Sunday the 12th of May 2019. The Institute of Election Management Services in Africa Chair Tselane says by law the Electoral Commission cannot release the election results until 2 days have lapsed after the election day. He joins us now to talk about this some more. But first of all, good evening and thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Tselane. To reflect back on the announcement there by the IEC, they emphasized the transparency, the credibility of the vote, and we know there are a lot of conspiracy theory during contested elections like this, and the margin of error is also very important. That would include some of the pollsters who would have predicted which party would win by how much. How important is that those predictions match the actual results on the day?
No. The results of an election are not determined by the polls.
Absolutely.
They are determined by the voters on the day of the election. So what the people who predict the outcome of the results of the election will do will obviously interview certain participants, a particular sample, and make a determination on the basis of that. But the actual results of the elections are determined by a person casting a vote.
And that's what I want to establish, the margin of error, which some people either misled or convinced by some of those posters. What do they take into account, especially as we're speaking about the counting? This will be a larger vote. Certainly the numbers may have dwindled, but the number of parties that are participating are a lot more than we've seen in previous elections.
Well, I'm not too sure what are the kind of the issues that they would have taken into consideration. But obviously from a person like myself who's been part of the electoral processes, you take in consideration only what is actually applicable at the voting station, and therefore there is no margin of error that you would allow.
But you've spoken about the fact that it's going to be a difficult task for electoral officials, not only from the counting perspective, but the ballot paper being a larger one to accommodate the number of political parties that are contesting provincial and national elections. How so?
Definitely there are going to be some operational challenges for the Commission. As you correctly pointed out, now you've got 48 political parties in the national ballot compared to about 29 in the previous election. And also when you look at the provincial level, you find that the number of political parties that are participating there has also increased. I mean, Northwest alone has gone up by 81%. Free State and Mpumalanga have gone up by 75%. And almost every province has actually gone up. Now, what this means is that the ballot paper is going to be very, very long. And because it's going to be long, in order to be able to accommodate all the political parties in a single page ballot, you also have got to try to compress a little bit the symbols of the political parties. Now, what this means is that when a voter gets into a ballot booth, they're going to be taking a lot of time trying to identify their political party. I mean,
are you suggesting that the ballot papers could be obscured because of those compressions?
A little bit. It's not going to be as big, the symbols are not going to be as big as in the previous ballot paper. And I'm sure that, that's the best that the Commission could actually do in order to be able to accommodate all this. But what this means also is that a voter will therefore take a long time in the ballot booth trying to identify their political party. This will obviously have implications in terms of management of the queues. But apart from that, you may have heard from the Commission that they've had to procure more ballot boxes in order to be able to accommodate this, because it means a ballot box is going to fill quicker.
Far quicker, yes.
Because of the size of the ballot paper. But apart from all those aspects, counting also is going to take longer. Remember
so
now,
before we get to counting, because I want to just still go through the process of voting, the issue of assisted voting of somebody who's either aged or visually impaired, and the fact that some of these symbols may be similar? I know in certain elections people have said this is an opportunity for the vote itself to be manipulated. In some countries you've had parties actually saying you must look for this symbol for you to vote.
Remember that in the electoral process we've got special rules catered for in the election timetable, and therefore those people who may require assistance would have applied to the Commission to be visited, and they'll be visited on the 6th of May. And on the 7th again, people who would not be able to go to their voting stations would also cast their special votes. And however, if a person gets to the voting station and has not actually taken advantage of this opportunity of a special votes, again they're going to be prioritized. They normally get prioritized by the officials of the Commission.
So there's no margin of error or manipulation there?
There can be. You know, the greatest thing about the South African situation and the system is that you've got two aspects that safeguard the integrity of the process. It is firstly transparency, and secondly accountability. Accountability in the sense that you've got party agents, you've got observers who are there to make sure that nothing irregular happens at a voting station.
Okay.
But apart from that, I mean, you've got quite a number of other mechanisms that have been put in place where anyone who is interested can actually take advantage of this, such as, you know, objections to certain processes. There are various instruments in law that a person can invoke: Section 41, Section 48, 49, 53, and 55, which basically relates to election results.
Let's talk about the counting. It's heady work, and if there are more political parties, more people voting in a particular district, so there also is should I say, a window for error, especially if one spends longer hours counting. This is what you're saying, that this is a possibility that we should keep in mind, that results could take longer as a result. Remember that people who are at the voting stations are also just human. And therefore, if you have spent almost 2 days without sleeping, because you've got to wake up very, very early to be at the voting station. And now when we've got to count a ballot paper with so many political parties, there is, of course, possibilities of errors occurring in those. But fortunately, as I've suggested, the presence of the political party agents, as well as observers there, will ameliorate that kind of a situation. And obviously the results are then posted outside when all are in agreement, the IEC officials, the party agents, and the independent observers, including the auditors. Absolutely. The results are going to be put outside the voting station, but also those results would have been signed by the presiding officer as well as the party agents present during the counting of the results. Okay, so let's talk about just regional dynamics and how South Africa compares with that. The first past the post system has come under criticism in various post-election articles for its unfairness, especially when it comes to legitimacy. What has been the IEC specifically's opinion of this? I can't speak on behalf of the Commission. In the past, but you can, yes, but you can speak now on your own. Remember that the Commission draws its mandate from the Constitution. So in terms of the Constitution, there are 3 major responsibilities. One is for the Commission to organize, manage, and conduct an elections, and the second one is to make sure that those elections are free and fair, and then lastly to declare the results of the election. So all other things operate within that particular framework. Therefore, the Commission, it's not in the realm of the Commission to make a determination in terms of what system should actually be applicable. The Commission just has to implement what Parliament but your view of this, because some have said in the past that it gives the victor undue legitimacy to take decisions on behalf of another party, or even if somebody has won, it's not necessarily them winning by majority, even in terms of the voter turnout. Well, my personal opinion is that the proportional representation system is still a better system, but obviously a mixed system is even much better. But the reason why proportional representation becomes
such a good system, in my opinion, it is largely because it gives voice even to smaller political parties that may not necessarily have won. If you're using the first past the post system, it means a political party that loses even by 2%, its voice completely disappears for that particular period.
So you suggested that as we evolve with our electoral system and including the dynamics which we're seeing now, larger participation in terms of multi-party presence, that we should digitize. But if we look at a country like India, which has such a huge number of votes, and they've done that, what would you suggest? Because some have said, would you rather that it be printed by private companies, the ballot papers in some instances, like we see in the US, or should it be government companies that are responsible for us going digital? Would that make it more credible?
Look, every system has got its own difficulties and challenges. There have been quite a number of elections, the results that have been rejected or contested based on a ballot paper, on a paper ballot, on a manual system. And therefore, a notion that suggests that digitizing the electoral process is going to lead to contestation, I think is really misinformed.
Well, some say if you take the US, for instance, you would get 2,000 votes in one machine, that there is a larger opportunity for hacking the number of votes.
But the electronic voting, an electronic system for voting, it means different things for different people. It depends what system you actually use. And I've suggested that the kind of electronic voting that we've got to go for as a country is the one that we should have paper trail, so that in case of a dispute, people can always go to the papers and count the papers manually.
So it would be dual?
Yeah. Almost like when you go to an ATM, you get a receipt, and that receipt is the receipt that will actually be used in case there is a dispute.
All right, thank you very much for speaking to us. Tselane is Institute of Election Management Services in Africa chairperson, and we'll have more election news coverage in just a moment.